Today's conversation is with Fred and Dan Murray of Ministry Books. When it comes to managing church finances, you really want people who are both competent in their field, but are also committed to the mission. And that's definitely the Murray brothers. They both have years of experience working in church ministry, but more importantly, they both have a strong desire to help churches live out their mission. In fact, that's actually why our church partners with Ministry Books to help us stay organized and accountable in our finances. We talked about a variety of issues, including church building projects, outsourcing help as your ministry grows, and which metrics are the best measure of your church's health. Here's part of my conversation with Fred and Dan Murray.
Welcome to the Financial Pathway Podcast. We're here to help you go to the next level in your finances with practical advice from speaker and financial planner Nate Skeller.
Okay, well, I've got Ministry Books back on the podcast, but we're doubling up this time. In fact, actually, I think this is the first time we're doing a three-screen Zoom podcast recording, so we're breaking history, or making history here. So Dan has been on the podcast before, but he's got his brother Fred along here today, so we're going to have a great conversation about church finances. So Fred, why don't we start here? Tell us about you, your family, and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so Las Vegas native, born and raised, grew up at Liberty Baptist Church, northwest side of town with Dave Tice. Always been a numbers guy. Went to college to start with accounting, Pensacola Christian, right around year 2000, and then switched over to pastoral ministries, but still kept the business side. Accounting was my minor. And then got a business master's over at Liberty a couple of years after that. Vegas has been home. It's where I went to start serving at Southern Hills Baptist Church 17 years ago now. I've always been in the admin pastor role with multiple things thrown on top of that. My wife Kelly and I actually met at college, but she went to Liberty Baptist Church when I wasn't there for a short period. We've been married now 20 years, and we have two kids, two boys, Shepard and Liam, and they are incredibly intelligent, and they're pretty decent hockey players, and so better than me. And so it's a lot of fun, great time to live in, and a lot of ministry opportunity, and thankful to be here and be a part of the podcast. So.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you mentioned hockey. I know from your social media pages that you guys are Las Vegas Knights fans, or at least, am I correct in that? Am I correct in that assessment? Both Las Vegas Knights fans?
Yeah. It's a very up and down relationship at times. So we are very invested. We have season tickets to the Gold Knights, Silver Knights, and their even indoor football team. And so the owner of the Knights gets lots of money from us, but we got to be business people. We sell a bunch of those tickets and, helps ease the cost a bit. So
yeah, there you go.
But we were in the arena. The night they won the cup in 2023, and it was bedlam. It was basically a 3-hour party, and it was probably the greatest sports day of my entire life. And there's plenty of video of Danny screaming like a girl on social. It was awesome.
Oh, we'll link to that in the show notes then. Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Well, the night that they've not been there for long, right? Because I remember when they were the expansion team, growing up in Pittsburgh, Penguins. It was Fleury. They had two goalies, and Fleury was drafted, and then. But I feel like the first year they got all the way to Stanley Cup Finals and they lost. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, they played Washington, and Ovechkin was just on a roll, and they lost 4-1 in the final series. But Fleury was really good for us. Probably the fan favorite. Many people cried when he got traded to Chicago a couple of years ago. But yes, expansion team, and was expected to be in last place, and ended up going all the way to the Cup final. That was a fun year, but inside, I think all of us were glad they made it. But I think also inside, none of us wanted them to win the very first year, and so which made Cup in six prediction, which the owner made here, our goal is to win the Stanley Cup in 6 years. So awesome
Yeah.
last June because it was the sixth year. So.
Yeah, it's really amazing that they were able to win in that short span of time. I think that's what makes hockey a very unique sport in that regard, that you can put together a winning team, from an expansion team in that short amount of time. Well, now that I've lost all our non-hockey fans, I guess that we should turn
to play finances. Well in Canada. Yeah, we'll play this in Canada. We'll be good.
Yeah, right. Well, the podcast will do great in Canada. We got three finance guys, so I'm sure this conversation is going to get very, very wild, off, like, just, we'll try to keep it interesting and engaging. So, Fred, you mentioned you've been at your church for 17 years now as admin pastor. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yep. And so 17 is admin, and then every other position except for music, I think I've done in that 17 years. And so it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, because what we're talking about today, and talking about how church financial management, you've been in that seat for a long time. You know the inner workings of what it means to understand church finances from a variety of different angles. And you now have teamed up with Dan with Ministry Books, but you're still working with Southern Hills in your role there, but now kind of branching off and doing some stuff with Ministry Books. So tell us, what does that look like with you coming over to Ministry Books? What are you doing? What is Dan doing? What does that whole picture look like?
Yeah, so one thing that Danny wanted to do from the get-go, but just didn't have the margin because he was focusing so much on bookkeeping and payroll. He really wanted to bring the consulting side on. And so what we did as at Southern Hills is we restructured our staff format. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it really freed me up to bring on the consulting side to Ministry Books. And essentially taking 17 years of church administrative pastor experience and bringing that to Ministry Books is the idea. So.
That's awesome. Dan, I'm curious. I don't even know this. Who's older, you or Fred?
Does that make me look older if you don't know that? Or no? Fred has me by 5 years older. Okay. So, yeah.
More gray in the beard. So
yeah, mine's starting to come in a little bit, but not as copious as Fred's gray patch there. So
yes. But, hey, well, as somebody who's got a little salt and pepper going on in the beard myself, I think it adds a level of dignity and refinement. So yeah. All right, Dan, this was not in the questions and topics I sent you ahead of time, but I'm just curious.
Curveball. Let's do it.
Finances aside, what's something that you would say Fred is better at than you?
Now we're getting into sibling rivalry questions. The first thing that pops up is we would, as kids, have video game tournaments against each other. And he would pretty much be the master over me in Madden or whatever game we played. But I did win, and I cheated in a way. And this is going to sound very bad, coming from our Ministry Books perspective and background. But while he was away at college one time, I created a team in Madden, and I made everybody 99 overall. And I said, hey, let's play Madden. And he wouldn't play me because my defensive tackle, his name was Jesus Christ, number 7, and led the league in sacks. And I was just being a funny little kid with it. But I think that's the only time I ever beat him in a video game, probably. Right. But he literally put the controller down, walked away, and he's like, I'm not playing this. You can't have Jesus on your team. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, we've been competitive. I don't know, like, we haven't had much competition lately on who's better than what, but I don't know. Outside of video games when we were kids, that's probably it.
Yeah. Well, so video games, but also he was a lot more spiritual because he took great offense to your
yes, he did.
Team name. Yeah. Yeah.
My sacrilegious. Good, so. Yeah, he was too good, and he couldn't throw the ball, couldn't run the ball, and so yeah, he tried to over spiritualize it and call me sacrilegious when he was just really getting beat. That's what it was.
Oh, so that's what it was. It was really a cover for not wanting to lose. I see. Yeah.
For not wanting to lose. Yeah. Like, this is cheating.
I would say this about Dan. Dan's better at, so we went to college. The first year Dan was there, it's like, oh, you're Fred's brother. And then quickly it shifted to, oh, you're Dan's brother for me. And so Dan's definitely the more outgoing, more people person, definitely more of a marketing customer relations niche. I am more behind the scenes, systems, processes, things like that. kind of where our skills, even though we're so similar in a lot of things, that's where we do differ a lot.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, I feel like I can relate, Fred, because as the older brother with Redemption Church, my brother Josh is the pastor, which that's a very interesting dynamic in of itself to have your younger brother be your pastor. But Josh is, he's very much more a much more people person, able to get along and make friends a lot quicker. I'm a much more cerebral type of person, so I can relate in that. It's
quite sense. Annoying. I hate it. It's annoying. So,
all right. So now that we've addressed a little bit of the sibling rivalry issues, let's get into the meat of what we want to talk about. So Dan, tell us kind of what your side of Ministry Books is then. So Fred's doing consulting, and then what are you mostly concentrating on with Ministry Books?
So with Ministry Books, we started out with the idea of, hey, we want to help you steward those resources so you could get back to focusing on increasing kingdom impact. And so a majority of Ministry Books from my responsibilities have focused on the bookkeeping and payroll areas. The consulting before Fred come on was basically me kind of explaining to our clients, here's your financial reports, here's some trends, some things to address, some things to look out for. The consulting was really financial in nature. Bringing Fred into the equation brings 17 years of administrative and executive pastor experience and knowledge to where that consulting service branches beyond financial. It could be building project, it could be staff policies, handbooks, structures, and things of that nature that really transforms Ministry Books from a financial services company to kind of our new model, church administration for the 21st century, where it's a one-stop shop for, yes, your bookkeeping, yes, your payroll, but also for your administrative needs in a remote capacity, having Fred on board to handle that new area of Ministry Books, expanded area, would be a better way of saying it.
Yeah, I like that. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about just how that role is shifted and changed. And Fred, I want to make sure that we take some time to talk about, even within your capacity, how your role has changed and how that evolution has led to what you're trying to do with Ministry Books and filling that need for a lot of churches that are in a similar spot. I wanted to go to a couple questions, and this will be mainly for Fred because he's kind of sit in the midst of it right now. Fred, your church, Southern Hills, is in a building project, and I think that's an area that a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, ministry leaders want to increase their knowledge base in, because even if a church is not currently in a building project currently, we understand how things are always shifting. Ministries are always needing to adapt. And when it comes to space, ministries have to get very creative about how they utilize that. Sometimes that means building, sometimes that means other alternatives. So tell us about your church's building project, where you're at in that process, and how you've been helping through all of that.
Yeah, and let me know if I'm getting too boring on this, because it's a lot of detail.
We'll just have Dan get like a buzzer ready or something. So if
I'll start snoozing if it gets, I'll start falling asleep over here now.
So to keep it real simple, COVID really pushed us to get a building, meaning I led a project in 2016. That was our first phase of our building projects. It was a 15,000 square foot building. We've been there. We're still there. It houses our kids ministry and roughly a 600 seat auditorium for our adult ministry. We're at a 3-service schedule. And so the issue came up is during COVID, we found that we ran out of kid space. So our kids were at a charter school right behind our property. And it was great until COVID hit. When COVID hit, we got kicked out, because all these mitigation rules and all these safety things that were being thrown around that we had to follow, and our kids had no place to go. And our spiritual formation pastor at the time, Caleb Sargent, now serves as our executive pastor. He basically said, "Hey, look, can we build a tent for the kids to go on the basketball court so they can meet in a larger setting than this itty bitty classroom that they're all stuck in?" And a tent turned into a gym, and a gym turned into a 16,000 square foot auditorium for the adults. And that way the kids will then get the existing building there. So that was the vision behind it. The details of how it went, or how it's going, roughly about a 3-year process that we've gone through. About 6 months of brainstorming with our staff. Hey, what do we want? Then we got into talking to the architects in the county, and that was a very long process for us. Clark County, where Las Vegas resides, made some shifts to do things a different way that essentially tripled the time of what it normally would take to get your building approved. And so got final approval in, I would say, late December of 23. So about 7 months ago. And now we've been building, and looking for an October 1st grand opening, or at least first Sunday in, right around that October 1st date, give or take a day or two. So
is it all on the same property, this new building? Is it adjacent?
Yeah. So it's just to the east, roughly whatever the width of a basketball court is. There's a basketball court in between building A, and building B is roughly 100 feet away. And that'll be the new auditorium, 16,000 square feet, essentially all auditorium with a small entryway and some bathrooms. One thing we're also going to do is do an outdoor lobby space, because it's becoming very popular in Vegas with all these restaurants that have the outdoor seating. We've learned how to help climate control those things the best we can. So it's one thing that we're going to do as well, in addition to the building project.
Yeah, that is a big benefit of being in the Southwest, is a lot of times you can utilize that outdoor space a lot better. So I'm really curious. You talked about, all right, it went from a tent to a gym to now we're building the new auditorium. How do churches, like what were the things that you looked at as Southern Hills that led you to the conclusion that we do need to go forward with a building project? A lot of churches say, oh, we're facing a size restriction of some kind. And they'll look at multiple options, going multi-service, which sounds like you already were doing multi-service, looking at purchasing an existing facility instead of, going through all the hurdles that it takes to build a new, or even just financially knowing when you are or are not in the right position to undertake a big project. So can you kind of walk us through that? Like, what were the things that you looked at that led you to that conclusion that the best thing for us is actually to go ahead and build this new building?
Yeah, it was really a team effort from our entire our entire executive team, if you will. Because Caleb brought up a great idea, and then gym became the thing. But the question came, okay, what does the gym benefit? And we were really hitting a point, even a 3-service schedule, where post-COVID, we were essentially able to get 500 people in a 600-seat auditorium fairly comfortably. And that literally dropped to like 375. People wanted their space, even though we have a very conservative church. They weren't worried about social distancing. Just naturally, people got used to being distanced from people. So we were hitting attendance bumps. And so we were at the point of, hey, we either go to a 4th service, which we've done before for a short period of time, but it really wore into Josh Tice's, not schedule, but he was just getting tired. He can preach 3 times a day, but the 4th one, for some reason, just takes him down. And again, I can imagine that world. That would be exhausting for me. So, but he's able to do 3, but we couldn't do 4. And just be more economic sense, we could have a gym, that'd be cool. But why not build an auditorium that benefits future growth? Because the question came up, how much growth can we get from a gym? And the answer was 0, essentially. I mean, we could have maybe events in there and things like that for conferences, but our calling was not conferences and events. Our calling was Sunday morning worship to bring people to Jesus. And that's really what was the best ROI that we could see. And gym was a great idea, tent was a great idea, but it didn't give opportunity for church growth. And we feel the building is the best option because it will seat up to 1,300 people. Which is our current attendance now, but we are fine with doing multiple services, even with the new build. We'll actually start off with 2 different services in the new build, and that's done in a couple of months.
Yeah.
So really just best bang for the buck, and also best bang for our time in reaching people. Again, gym's a cool idea, but we felt it wasn't going to be as effective in reaching people and discipling people. So that's why we went with the auditorium model overall.
Yeah, I love that. And what I'm hearing in that, Fred, is that in these really difficult and complicated decisions, you're trying to come back to the core of what is it that is ultimately our goal and our mission in this next step? What are we really trying to accomplish? Because there's a little bit of a, I'm sure for any organization, church is no exemption to this, a little bit of an egotistical or empire building tendency in all of us to say, wouldn't it be so great to have this amazing thing, right? It's almost like a monument to ourselves. And I think every organization needs to be careful about coming back to why. And that may very well lead to the conclusion, yes, we need to go ahead and build this very large building, go into this building project. But if there are other avenues or other options that still serve that purpose in a way that utilizes resources a lot more efficiently, then great, then you utilize those. But I appreciate that answer, because that was really where I was trying to go with that. With that is, how did you?
Mission is key.
Yeah,
the mission is so key, and there's personal things I wanted. I would have loved to have a gym. How much hockey or basketball you can play in a gym. I mean, that would have been amazingly fun. But it's not about me. It's not about me. I can't wait for a kitchenette or a kitchen to get done so I can eat at the office much nicer food, but it's not about me. And so, like, I don't even have an office. Like, I'm sitting in my home office. My other office is literally 3 feet behind where Dan's at now with the Ministry Books offices. And just because, again, I could have a nice 20 by 20 office with all my posters and pictures and books up, but that's also 400 square feet of where we could put people to sit and hear the gospel on Sunday. And so our church, again, other churches have different models and stuff like that. And maybe to a fault, we are overly mission focused, but we don't have offices because we rather have 40 extra seats in the auditorium.
Yeah.
It's kind of how we have done things, and just keeps us on mission and helps us filter out unnecessary projects and whatever it may be. So.
Yeah, I was surprised when I visited Southern Hills a few years ago, actually being on site with your current auditorium setup. Like, yeah, that takes up most of that building space. Like, there are classrooms, but there's not too much else to that building. I mean, most of it is centered around the auditorium and that space for that Sunday morning gathering. Dan, have you been involved at all in the building project, or is this something that you've been kind of observing from afar?
More observing from afar, really, from a church member standpoint. My wife and I joined the membership at Southern Hills back in October of last year. And so my involvement is, hey, I'm just a regular church member. I get to get involved in the giving campaigns. I get to get involved in taking a tour of the new facility. And it's just really exciting. Every week we come back to church and it just looks a little bit more complete as the work has progressed over time. And even my kids this is the first time in any time in my ministry life where I've been on staff at churches to be actually physically involved in a church that's having an active building project. So my kids get to see that. And I get to have those conversations with them. Like, why are we building another building? So, and then to turn around and say, so to echo the mission, so we can reach more people with the gospel of Christ in our community. And that's why that building is being built. And so it's exciting to kind of be on the outside looking in, so to speak, right now. And so, which I have no problem, with that level of involvement. I know how much time my brother spends in meetings and calls. In fact, we drove to a men's retreat back, I want to say, early part of this year. I'm driving, he's on a Zoom call while we're driving down the road with builders. And so I was like, yeah, that's a lot of work. And so, yeah, I'm the observer in this context. So,
yeah. Well, Fred, since you've been kind of running point on this building project, what advice would you give to a church about what are like the biggest mistakes that a church could be making launching into a new building project? From your experience, what would you caution people about?
There's that biblical parable of count the cost. Everybody always looks at, hey, what is the architect or what's the general contractor going to charge you for the building? And they give you your $4 million, $4.5 million number. But then you have other costs, FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, equipment. Do you have chairs? Do you have audio visual? Are you paying your architect and your civil engineers? And so there's just a lot of things that I think we underestimate the cost of a building. Because again, we're not in the construction world. We simply go to general contractor. Hey, what's this cost per square foot? oh, it's going to be $400 a square foot, 10,000 square foot building, 4 million bucks. There are so many other things that are into that. Like your bank charges you a fee to monitor the bills being paid. I mean, there's just so I would say the biggest mistake we make, or it's a trial by fire, is realizing there's more than just the land or the construction cost. Building number one, we had to spend $250,000 to bring water to the site. A lot of people I'm talking to, the off sites, there's a lot of cost into that. So I'm really thankful for people that really do a lot of work on the due diligence period. Like, what is the cost? And so I'd say don't underestimate. Um, it's more complicated than you think, but if you ask simple questions, you can get those answers. And I think that's why when Ministry Books is around, and this consulting idea is around, is to, hey, Fred, what are the questions we need to ask at this particular time? Because it's hundreds of questions, but if you break it down into different segments, it's very manageable for a church to go through, and very beneficial and rewarding. So.
There any other like unexpected hurdles? You mentioned, the water, you need to get water to the site being $250,000. Any other things that have come up?
Yeah. Besides the water, and actually when we turned the water on, there was no water because we connected to the wrong pipe because the county didn't tell us the right pipe to connect to. That was funny. But I would say for us, the biggest one on this phase is I was projecting 12 months of county approval. And so you do your original planning, architects get the designs, kind of get your basic price dialed in. Then you submit plans to the county. That usually takes 12 months, but they made some changes to their system that now turned it into average to 24 months. And so you have Pastor Josh saying, hey, look, we're going to be in this building in January 2024, and the county just did something to totally mess up that timeline. And so it's like very stressful, very frustrating. So I think that the municipalities post-COVID are way slower than they used to be. So what you did in 2016, almost double timeline, at least on the planning side. Construction's maybe about 25% longer, but planning side's definitely double. And I had to push really, really hard with a lot of public officials to get the 24-month timeline down to 18 months. I'm having meetings with the county commissioner and basically saying, this is what I want, this is what I need. And a lot of favors. Again, not talking like political favors, like handing over $10,000 checks, but hey, we need help here, and let's get through this. So I would say for us, the biggest issue on this building was the timeline of the county, which made Josh stressed out because he's making a promise and he wants to keep it, but you have something you really can't control, and that's the frustrating part. And so I would say give yourself long enough lead time. What's the phrase? Over or what's under promise, over deliver. I'm mixing that up or whatever. But the idea is, don't lock yourself into, we'll be done by December 24th of this date. Yeah. Not going to happen. But leave yourself plenty of stuff, because even now we're having the issue is with construction side is the reason construction is taking longer is there's a less of a workforce. And so we literally 15 years ago, the entire job crew was 25 years old. And now on this building, the entire job crew is 45 years old. We're not getting young construction workers anymore. And so the labor force is getting changed as well. Yeah. And so, so the longer you take to get a building going, the longer it'll take to get done. Because it's just labor's hard. Inflation's hard. Inflation caused us to change our total design in the building. But materials went up 25% in 12 months of planning. Yeah. So you got to make adjustments. And so
I feel like there's such a corollary with what you're saying with church, the building project and church planning with financial planning in general. And a phrase that I've really read that's really resonating with me is that certainty is easy to sell, but impossible to deliver. Like in the financial world, it's so easy to say, hey, here's a foolproof plan to get you to retire at age 60. Or here's, a great plan for guaranteed income for life, or da-da-da-da. Like, it's easy for people to do those things and to for you to put those things out and for people to be like, oh, wow, that sounds great. We'll get to this place at exactly the right time and exactly the right way. But the problem is life is full of ups and downs. Life is full of unpredictable twists and turns. And whether that's the church building project or your own personal finances, you never know how it's going to turn out. Yeah. So it sounds like that's part of that learning process. And it's really good to relay that to people before they head into a similar thing themselves.
And I would just say be balanced. I've seen other churches doing building projects where it's like, you know what, it's in God's timing and there's no pit bull there driving the county or whatever. You need to have somebody like me on the phone saying, what's going on? Can I set up a meeting? We need to talk. And my project is done twice as fast. But at the same time, though, I need to understand is like, hey, look, not everything is in my control. God has a reason for why it's going. So I think there's a balance of, it's in God's timing versus I need to be working as well. And I've not perfect in it. I think I've got it down pretty well. And so with building, this is now big building number 2, but construction project number 4 for me. I think that balance is key.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I appreciate you sharing that about the building project. I really felt like that's something that a lot of people would like to learn from your experience and kind of see what the takeaways for you have been. This is bringing us back then now to all this experience that you've had as admin pastor, executive pastor, whatever terminology we want to use there. This is a problem a lot of churches are facing that maybe are not at the size of Southern Hills, right? Mm-hmm. Like they don't have the capacity for a large pastoral team. When does it make sense? Like in your experience now working with Ministry Books, and Dan, I'll put this to you first, and then Fred, if you have any additional thoughts, just jump in. But Dan, when it comes to church financial management, why does it make sense for some churches to outsource that to Ministry Books or some other service? A lot of churches have people in-house that take care of it. Maybe somebody is a part-time financial secretary, maybe somebody who volunteers their time that has CPA or bookkeeping experience. So what are the situations that you're finding that are the right fit for Ministry Books?